Hi, everyone. Hello. It is so good to see you tonight. We're going to go get started. Thank you for joining us for this post-election update. My name is Leah Greenberg. I am joined in hosting this call by my fellow Indivisible leaders, Madi Urbina and Ezra Levin. Madi Urbina, folks will know, is Indivisible's managing director. She was a major leader or a majority leader, Harry Reid deputy, before she made the crazy decision to jump over to join the Indivisible movement when she saw the movement building in early 2017. My co-executive director and husband, Ezra Levin, is going to be here shortly. He is joining us a little late tonight because he is quite literally on the Rachel Maddow show right now, telling folks to come on over here. So he'll be joining us as soon as he can hop off of the show and into a quiet place in the studio. Now, before we get started, I just want to say a couple of notes. First, please hit the closed caption button if you do not see closed captions and would like to. We are going to plan to leave the chat on throughout because we welcome your conversation and your processing. I think we all have a lot we need to process right now. Please keep it respectful and kind. Today is incredibly hard. I know feelings are raw. We got to be good to each other because we're going to be in this together and we need each other. We're also going to have a live Q&A. So if you have a question, please go to the Q&A function. That is where we are going to be pulling questions. Our team is going to try and collect as many of them as possible so we can answer as many as we can cover in the time we've got. Okay, with that out of the way, I want to start off this call by saying I would give anything for this to be a celebration tonight. I know this call is full of people who have given their hearts and their souls in the fight to stop Trump, in the fight to elect Kamala Harris. You deserve so much better than the results of last night. We all deserve so much better than the results of last night. And so before we dive in, I just want to start by thanking you and acknowledging your presence and your work. Some of you have been with Indivisible since the last time we were facing a Trump win, since early 2016. Some of you have been with us for a few months as part of the Women Wednesdays for Harris call and action series and action teams. Either way, you have been active you have been changing your communities in meaningful, impactful ways inside and outside the Indivisible movement for weeks, for months, for years, for lifetimes. It is normal after a terrible loss to feel adrift, but I really need you to know the work you did here mattered. The power you built mattered. Every door you knocked, every conversation you had, every way you stretched yourself over this election cycle, that is part of how we are going to be ready for what's next. So tonight, we are going to talk about a few things. First, I'm going to turn it over to Madi to kick us off with a little bit about what we know and where we stand. Then we're going to go into our analysis of what happened in a Q&A, and we are going to talk about what comes next and what we're going to do. And I'm going to toss it to Madi to share what we know in this moment.
Thank you so much, Leah. And thank you all for being here tonight. We know that, for most of us, our highest value tonight will be about being together. And that's really what we hope to offer you, is space, is connection, is a sense of a container so that we can take what we build here, what we feel here, and continue to be really a lot of the people who are holding space for the rest of our communities and our networks in our lives. And so I don't want to over focus too much on things that you may have read already, you may have seen already, but do want to just give us a shared baseline of where we're at. A couple caveats. One, I just want to name that it really is indeed too early to have confident takes about what happened. And so we're going to move through this period with a lot of humility, a lot of curiosity, and for sure a lot of interrogation about what we want to learn, but also not over apply any of these things because it's just too early. And a quick word on the exits, on the exit polls, especially the ones that you're probably hearing about in the press. They're extremely imperfect instruments. They have incredibly small sample sizes. And most importantly, they do not reflect final vote counts or validations that are really important and made by validators like Catalyst and Pew. So I just want to name that as well, because it's really easy to start taking some of the inputs we're getting and over applying them. So now, in the race for the president, we know that Trump has taken all seven swing states. We know that he will likely win the popular vote after all the votes are tallied, including even after votes are tallied in California. And this has happened because there's been swings across the board, across geographies, rural, suburban, and urban. And in addition to that, there's also been rightward shifts across communities and across our entire electorate and country. And so we'll just leave it at that because, again, we do not want to over apply or get into the finger pointing that's already starting to happen because it's not constructive and it's not going to help us all build the power that we need to proceed into this next part of our work. In the Senate battlegrounds, we have lost the Senate. And we knew coming into this cycle, it was going to be a tough cycle for Democrats. It was going to be a tough map. We were optimistic. We thought we could overcome an extremely challenging map. But what I'm feeling hopeful about is that we still have three outstanding Senate races that have not been called in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, and in Nevada. As of right now, Pennsylvania is looking like the toughest at this point for Senator Casey. He's down 27,000 votes last reported out. And so that would mean that there's still a lot to make up in what's left to count. That would mean that if he loses, he joins John Tester, Senator Tester and Brown as key Democratic incumbent losses. Those are really tough. Those are tough losses for sure. And then I want to go out west to Nevada. That's where I grew up. That's where I trained. As Leah mentioned, I was part of our Senator Reid team in 2010 and spent most of the first half of my career working in the Senate for Senator Reid. And so I feel very close to both Nevada and Arizona. And I'll just note that Senator Jackie Rosen is a great candidate. She knows Nevada. She's worked really hard across the state. And so I'm really optimistic that given that she's only down by a fraction of a percentage point, and given that there's still a lot of mail ballots, 55,000 out of Clark County, which is the most populous county in Nevada, which is where a lot of Democrats get a lot of votes, that if she wins those 2-1, and of course that's a big if, but if she can continue in this trend, she could still win. And so we're going to keep paying attention to Nevada. In addition to that, we're going to support the curing efforts that are there. As you know, there's about 13,000 mail ballots that need signature cures. And so we're doing our part to lift that up to make sure that folks get their mail ballots cured in time, which is November 12th. And then finally in Arizona, which is for many of you who I've gotten to work with this cycle, Arizona, I feel like I've become adopted in Arizona. It's an important state, and Ruben Gallego is comfortably leading Kari Lake right now. And we know that votes are still being counted. There's a lot of votes to count in Maricopa County. Approximately 700,000 ballots are left to tabulate in the coming days. Obviously, we feel good about the margins currently. And we also are going to want to make sure we keep watching. And similarly, in Arizona, we are helping with ballot curing efforts. And I'm just gonna out there, like we're still also hopeful for some of the work that happened in Arizona 1 and 6. So we are gonna stay posted on those races. We're obviously celebratory and just want to give a big, big shout out to Indivisibles in Wisconsin and Michigan for your Senate races that have been called for Baldwin and Slotkin. Those are necessary. Those were huge, huge wins, and they were not guaranteed. And it will mean that we will at least have some bright spots this cycle. So I'm going to kick it back over to Leah while we continue to wait for Ezra to join us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maddie. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the house and then some bright spots, and then I'm gonna pull out the lens and talk a little bit about the top lines here. So as folks may know, the house is still a jump ball. Republicans do have an edge, it looks like, on securing a majority. It's very likely to be a quite slim majority either way, potentially like literally a one-seat majority in either direction. A lot of this will come down to California, which, as everybody who's been around for a cycle or two knows, takes an incredibly long time to tell us who has won these elections. So while we've got some real hopes for some Democrats who are leading in some of those races, they're all really too early to project. And we're just likely not going to know those results until next week. One thing I do want to lift up that is important, that I know a bunch of people who are part of the Indivisible community have been part of, is reproductive freedom ballot measures passed all over the place. In Arizona, in Colorado, in Maryland, in Missouri, in Montana, in Nevada, reproductive freedom was on the ballot and it passed. We were not able to overcome the 60% threshold in Florida, which is an incredibly frustrating and deeply, deeply painful reality. And unfortunately, we did not successfully get over the threshold in Nebraska and South Dakota. But overwhelmingly, this was a resounding set of votes for reproductive freedom everywhere in the country, including in really red areas. Um, we're going to get more into what happened and why in the Q&A, but I want to just say up front, I want to echo what Madi said and say a loss of this nature is going to require some real humility and exploration and not finger pointing and circular firing squads. Um, and I say that for a couple of reasons. First, as Madi noted, all of the inputs that we've got right now are incredibly preliminary. We will not get the voter files back until late mid next year. What we're working off of is really limited data, and it's easy to take those limited data and make wild inferences with it. That's one piece. I also think it's just important to name that when we're in a moment like this, there are going to be critiques flying between the different camps, and I think it's really important to say out loud, a loss of this scope is not something that we can ultimately reasonably attribute to a single campaign strategy or decision. I would encourage everyone here. I know people are trying to think through what is this? What does this mean? How did this happen? I think we have to pull the lens back. I think that what happened on Tuesday night is rooted in, first and foremost, the failure to hold Donald Trump accountable for his crimes in his first term. The fact that he was allowed to leave office after staging a violent coup in 2021 and did not face immediate accountability, barring him from office and prosecuting him. I think our loss is rooted in the fragmentation of the anti-MAGA coalition, including defections from corporations and from billionaires like Jeff Bezos, like Elon Musk. I think it's rooted in this very sinister evolution of the media infrastructure and social media platforms. I think it's exacerbated by sexism and racism. And I think when we look back, it is rooted in a very, very hard geopolitical reality, which is that we had a president who was an incumbent during a historically unpopular time for incumbents. If you look globally around the world, pretty much everyone who presided over the era of inflation and post-COVID period from 2021 to 2022 lost office during their next reelection. Um, that is simply the case, and it just reflects the reality that this is the incredibly uphill battle that we were fighting. We faced really broad popular frustration and alienation, and that allowed Trump to successfully brand himself as a change candidate. We know that alienation is rooted in a sense that democracy is not delivering. We've got to learn more. We've got to think harder about how we're gonna process this result, how we're gonna reach out to people who didn't vote this time, how we're gonna reach out to people who voted for change but are not gonna like what happens next under Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has no solutions. He has nothing to offer beyond chaos and cruelty and corruption. He has capitalized on discontent with the status quo to win, but that does not mean that he is capable of governing in a way that brings anyone together or that delivers for anybody in his coalition. So we're going to prepare to push back. We are going to prepare to build that backlash. We are going to fight every step of the way, tooth and nail, to stop him from inflicting harm on our people, on our communities, on our democracy, and we're going to push them back. Now, I want to just take a minute to recognize that this is incredibly intense. All of this is incredibly intense. And I want to just pause and hold some space for everybody on this call before we go into Q&A. Folks are processing, folks are holding on. Before we go into Q&A, I just want us to take a second to ground ourselves in our whys. Why are we doing this work together? If you have a why, I encourage you to put it in the chat box. My why, I'll say my why into as you all do. My why is my kids. I've got two kids. I've got a boy who's 4, a girl who's almost 2. I want them to grow up in a world where the stories that they read, the storybooks that I read them about, a world where animals are live in harmony, where people are good to each other, where people are fair, where things work out. I want those stories that I read them to be true. I want to fight to make those true. That's why I do my work. Madi, do you want to speak to why you do yours?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Um, the first person I heard from today, first thing in the morning, was my 20-year-old nephew who lives in Nevada, and who's turned out to be just one of my greatest insights as I move through this work. And so um, I have like major tia vibes. Tia means auntie for folks who don't speak Spanish. And My why is largely rooted in my family and in our journey and in being from a hardworking immigrant working class family that is very tight and also I think my family has always wondered why I do this work and have always felt nervous about it and so I just want to say like my why is so that my nephews and my niece and hopefully my future kids as I continue in my own journey to parenthood and that they will live in a safe and an affirming in a place where we all have dignity and we can leave our communities better than we found them. And so my why is just to make sure that families like mine, but families all around the country that are not like mine, that we all have a chance to have bonds that matter, that we have connections that matter, that we have work that brings us dignity, and then we can do it in a way that is safe and honors our just our humanity.
Thank you, Maddie. I'm going to say, first of all, the chat box is beautiful. It's going too fast for me to read every single one that's going by, but this is just an incredible record of why people are in this work, why we are collectively unified in doing this work, why we're not going to fucking give up right now because there is too much at stake. And with that, I want to just add one more thing before we go into Q&A. There were victories this cycle. There were small victories, there were big victories. I want to shout out a few folks that I know have done incredible work this cycle. First, the reason that we've got a chance of taking the House is the extraordinary work of a big bunch of y'all in New York. People have been working their hearts out over the last year and a half and 2 years to hold accountable Republican representatives in those flippable New York districts, going out, getting the media, doing the protests, doing the voter contact, everything people could possibly imagine to make sure that the voters in those districts understood that those representatives were rubber stamps for the Mike Johnson agenda and the Trump agenda, and it paid off big. That work was incredible. I want to celebrate and shout those folks out. I also want to note that there are folks who've been doing incredible work on the ballot initiatives. Like I said, reproductive freedom was on the ballot all over the country, and our folks in Maryland, Montana, Nevada, New York, Missouri, Colorado, Arizona, folks organized tirelessly to get those initiatives on the ballot and to enshrine abortion rights into your state constitutions. You collected the signatures, you held the events, you talked to the neighbors. I want to ask folks while I'm speaking as well, if you had a success, if you had a win during this cycle, pop it in the chat box, okay? If you've been working on something that you are proud of and you are holding your sadness at what has happened at the national level, but you're also holding something that you have accomplished, tell us about it in the chat. I see Washington State went all blue. I see, oh, New York Proposition 1. I see Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland. That's right. We are going to have 2 Black women senators this cycle. Angela Alsobrooks, Lisa Blunt Rochester from Delaware. Yes, securing ballots in Pennsylvania. California 13 going blue. Wow. Just incredible work all around. So as we continue to celebrate and as we continue to honor each other's work, chat box is not slowing down. But I'm gonna go ahead and switch us over to Q&A and start talking about what happened and why. Now, give the chat box one more second to slit. All right. Um, let's see. Okay, I am seeing a question about is it possible that Trump could have helped steal the election given the unexpected high turnout and the reports of irregularities, or is there a possibility of Russian interference? Okay, I've seen a couple of versions of that come up in the chat. Um, this is a hard question to fully wrap our heads around because the reality is that we do understand that there have been Russian attempts at various efforts, Russian efforts to subvert our democracy. That is real. Simultaneously, I think a really common thing that happens during a cycle like this and in a really tough loss like this is that we look for evidence of irregularities as some way to overturn what happened. The swing, I want to just say out loud, I think it's important to name the swing was pretty uniform, and it was pretty uniform across the country in a way that is pretty demonstrative of a broad popular shift. That is incredibly hard. That is incredibly painful to grapple with. Uh, but we want to grapple with it and we want to face it clear on because we build clear strategies here. We build clear strategies for how we fight back. We build clear strategies for how we win, and we don't do those things if we don't face the facts heads on. In 2020, Republicans dug into those irregularities around voting and they didn't separate questions about, is there an irregularity here from would that change the outcome? And they ended up kind of going into an election denial place. That is not who we are. Our focus now is on the bigger picture of the election. It's on the trends. It's on what are we going to do to build our coalition so that it is so big that it can withstand and push back Trumpism and so that we can ultimately push them back out again.
We got another question here. What does this mean for the Dem Party? How can they recover? How do they need to change? What does this mean about what they got so wrong? And I think we can contextualize a tiny bit, but I want to take us back to we really won't have the sharpness, the rigor in surfacing the insights we want to surface until we can validate exactly what happened with the voter files. It pains me to say that. And also, maybe one thing to pull out though is in a presidential like this, one of the things that all of us were watching for is th the makeup of irregular voters. And that was going to be a big unknown for folks. And so when you look at the dynamics of the electorate, you look at the makeup of it and how it interacts across the board, that was a big it was hard to fully tabulate and understand the presence of how many voters like these would show up. And so that's also why it can be a little tricky to have conversations about turnout, because that continued to be something that was not predictive or easy to project.
Right. All right, I'm seeing what are the hopes that we will have another election? Isn't Trump planning dictatorship and dictator rule? It's a good question. I want to say this really, really clearly. Part of the fascist playbook is claiming powers that you do not have, claiming the ability to do things that you do not have, and succeeding when people preemptively concede those powers to you. It is incredibly important in this moment that we do not do that. We are not going to give Donald Trump power that he does not have. Would he like to be a dictator? Yes, he would like to be a dictator. He has made that very clear. That's not how American government works. That is not how his experience coming back in is going to work. We're going to be there on day one. We're going to push back hard. We're going to use every lever at our disposal, whether that is the federal government, whether that is protest, whether that is blue states and purple states where we control the levers of power, whether that is our cultural power, our economic power. We are going to mount a wholesale societal campaign with the biggest tent that we possibly can for democracy to push them back and to push them out of office. So when you hear somebody say, oh, there aren't going to be elections anymore, you got to stare that person down and tell them there are going to be elections and we are going to win those elections. We are going to stomp them in those elections because, again, we are not going to do the fascist work for them and we are not going to give them power they don't have.
That's right, Leah. We got another question in. Is anyone talking about how to make as much policy change as possible during the lame duck in the last few months of this administration? And just to name you know, Leader Schumer is going to need to really prioritize floor time around what is left of confirmations that we can make into the judiciary specifically. Like that's going to be one of the key things that, that takes up a lot of floor time. And we're going to want to be understanding the plan and pushing for a plan that really does everything possible to secure our democracy and secure the safety of our people. Anything else you'd add there, Leah? I'm sure there's other things I'm missing, but that's just one thing that um, is I'm remembering is really important in the lame duck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The lame duck. And for folks who are not familiar with the terminology here, lame duck is that period of time when we still have a Democratic Senate and Joe Biden in office. This is a period of time where you can confirm judges, you can move some additional administrative actions. President Biden obviously has pardon power that he can use freely to kind of address specific cases. This is a huge opportunity to try to lock in whatever gains we can and protect as many people as we can during this period. And so we will absolutely be thinking about how do we use that? How do we encourage Democrats to use that to the maximum? And we're also going to use this time to get ready ourselves. Now, I'm going to switch over to a follow-up question around the election itself. How is this even possible given Democratic turnout and ground game efforts? Why does it look like our turnout was huge and it wasn't? Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to just say out loud to folks, I know that it's easy to kind of look at the ultimate result and say, oh, none of it mattered. What we're looking at when we look at the election results collectively, or I'll pull the lens back and say, when we look across the country, what we saw was on average a 6-point shift in Republicans' direction, which is incredibly depressing. In swing states, in the state presidential states that were contested, it was more like a 3-point shift. So that 3 points, that is the product of a determined campaign. That is the product of a determined ground game. I know folks here were part of that extraordinary and incredibly dedicated ground game. That is what you were able to make up with your shoe leather, with your hard work. It did matter. Unfortunately, when we have a shift of this magnitude, it is not sufficient on its own to make the difference. So I want folks to feel and believe that they really did do work that mattered. And if we had been a little bit closer, it would have played. And unfortunately, we just weren't close enough.
We got another question here about what can we actually do once he's in office? What's the plan? So one thing just to name and speaker, I'm trying to manifest y'all. I was about to say Speaker Jeffries. So they are not saying this is gone yet. So we should also hold that like there is still hope in the House, and we got to hang on to that because that gives us structural power to be a counteracting force against an administration that's going to be completely unruly. So, there's investigatory power, there's subpoena power there if we hold on to the House majority, just to point out, oh, Ezra's back. Hey,
Hey
Ezra.
folks. Hey, sorry I'm late. I was just on MSNBC with Rachel and Jen and everybody else, but I told them about this call and I told them about the call happening tomorrow. So let's keep on going. I'll jump in.
Wonderful. Maddie, do you want to wrap that one? And I'll kick the next question over to Ezra.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's it. And that's part of why we're here tonight, right? Is that we have to start now. And obviously we want folks to take the care that they need, but we cannot lose each other or our communities to despair because there is going to be a lot to protect. There's going to be a lot to fight, and we're going to have to hold, especially folks in our most vulnerable communities down. And so just to say, like, yes, I believe him. I take him at his word for what he's saying and what's in Project 2025, which means we are going to need a network that is strong, that is together, and that helps folks locate their power in this very moment, because that is where we're going to largely source our power from. So just wanted to add that last thing. If there's anything else y'all want to add there as well.
No, that's right. I'll tee up the similar question. Ezra, I think you are coming live in to give us the high level. What do we actually do? What are we actually going to be able to do once Trump is in office? What is the plan? What is next if they control everything? And I think a subset of that, how real are the threats of Project 2025 and what will it be possible to stop?
Great. The easy questions coming in. Great. Thank you for that. And sorry for the fluorescent lights. I'm backstage it's not the green room. It's somewhere else at MSNBC. So normally I would have a cool background like Madi or Leah. But can I just say, it is so great to be in community with all of y'all here, seeing all of the emojis and the chat. I really, really appreciate everybody being here. This is a really, really hard time. And I love this movement. I love this force. It is so powerful. It is so inspiring. We have accomplished so much together, and I wish we were in a different place right now. I really do, but we are going to accomplish so much more together. So let me say a couple things. So that the threat of Project 2025 and the opportunity in front of us to wield power, the threat of Project 2025 is real. It is real. There is of course, a reason why Trump tried to distance himself from it in the campaign. It's because it's deeply unpopular, just about every aspect of that 900-page plus document. but it is real. It was created by some of the closest Trump advisors. These are folks who are likely to determine who becomes a Trump appointee, who serves in the cabinet, who is driving policy in the House and in the Senate. So the threat is real. This is not some made up document. It is a real strategic document that they put together with the intent to use it. And then they tried to hide it during the campaign. But what can we do? What can we actually do about it? We still live in a democracy, y'all. We live in a democracy. It is a deeply flawed democracy in great peril, but this is a democracy, a representative democracy, which means the power is ours. We lend it to the representatives. We lend it to them. It's on loan temporarily. They get to use it for a time. But we know that members of Congress, they are craven animals who seek nothing more than public adulation and reelection. That's what makes them tick. And so the key understanding in the original guide and the key foundational principle of Indivisible is that constituent power is real if we organize it. If we organize in our communities and make our representatives understand that we oppose what they are doing. God, that word no, the word no is so powerful. If we use that word no, we can scare the bejesus out of them. We can make them fear for their political futures and we can affect what they do. And I know this because we've done it before. We've done it repeatedly. We don't know who's going to hold the House of Representatives. I'm sure y'all have covered this. This is up for grabs. We're doing ballot curing. We're trying to lock it down. But even if they control it by a seat or two, even that if that's the case, and there is a Republican trifecta, they had a 40 plus seat majority in 2017 when their top legislative priority was repealing the Affordable Care Act. And we scared them so much that they weren't able to accomplish that political priority. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's not going to be easy for them either. It's not going to be easy for them because Trump got a majority of the vote. That pains me to say he got a majority of the vote. You know what didn't get a majority of the vote? Repealing the Affordable Care Act, getting fluoride out of water, separating families. That stuff is deeply, deeply, deeply unpopular. And the best way for them to make their way to the minority and get thrown out of office is to prioritize those policies. Because when they do, we're going to make sure everybody who is upset with the status quo and sat out this election or took a chance and voted for quote unquote change with Trump is going to find out they have deep buyer's remorse. And they're going to join our majority coalition that gets them out of office.
Thank you, Ezra. Thank you for bringing the energy in. All right. I am going to, the next question that we have is, what can we do to protect our undocumented neighbors, our trans children, other folks who we know are going to come under threat from the Trump administration? Does anyone want to take that or should I jump in?
Go for it, Leah.
All right. So I would say, first of all, we're going to be talking about this a lot. We are going to be working with you to figure out exactly like what are the strategies that you take that are specific to the different communities that are under threat, that are specific to who you are and what leverage you have, because it's going to look different in different places. If you are in a blue state, we are going to be working on pushing our elected officials, pushing those blue state governors, those people who are going to want to prove that they're not like Trump, that they're going to stand up to Trump. We're going to say, what are you going to do? How are you going to protect people in your state? How are you going to leverage the power of your state to protect people around the country? What are you going to do to show that you are prepared to actually stand up to Trump and the MAGA forces? If you are in a purple state, we're going to be fighting the same fight. We're going to be fighting, and we're also going to be fighting for some of the core functions of democracy, because we know that this election denial movement, they are continuing. If you're looking at some of the local results in some of the states that we have contested, there are election deniers who are getting into office in county clerks' offices in Arizona, in Nevada. Those fights will go on to ensure that the basic functions of representative democracy in those places continue. If you are in red communities, folks who have been in red states have been organizing under enormous threat, under enormous peril for a long time. They have been fighting to protect their trans children. They have been fighting to protect undocumented folks. They have been facing extra legal violence and or threats of state violence for an extended period. And they have a lot to teach us all about how we are going to collectively move through a period in which these threats are escalating for all of us. So it's going to look different based on where you are, but it is important work wherever you are. And we're going to figure out how we do it together and how we help you do it and build your power locally.
Totally agree with Leah. And I would just add that like one of the key one of the key things that we should just be prepared for is that this administration is gonna the whole goal is for them to make us all feel isolated, to make us feel different from each other, to make us feel disconnected. And it will be so important that we continue to have dialogue with each other, with our neighbors, with folks, the relationships that you have all built over the last 7 years, to make sure you're continuing to tend to them and nourish them. One of the things that we'll be sharing out tonight is a conversation guide for just the first step being to get together with those folks in your community and have conversations of care, but also conversations of solidarity, because we know they're going to try to make it chaotic. We know they want us to feel, again, like we're alone and overwhelmed. And part of our medicine for that is to be together, and to think really clearly about how we show up for each other, and that we show up for the fight because they will be counting us out. So I just want to add that as like an immigrant myself, as someone who is deeply involved in immigrant rights work and is close to a lot of other immigrants in our country. Like I feel really clear that our fights are still very much tethered and they are overlapping, and the ways that, the ways that I worry about my own family are the ways that I worry about families that are completely distinct to my own. And I know that many of you bring that to the work, as well. So I just like want to start by one saying like we got to stick to this, we got to stay in this together, and do things that help bring people in.
That's great. Thank you, Madi. All right. I've got a question about organizing and growing groups. How do we organize and mobilize to reach voters who voted for Trump or didn't vote, especially in rural areas and small towns? How will we engage and organize new people in our groups? How do we bring people back who have dropped off? I also just want to note as I say that, I'm seeing a lot of people asking how many folks are on this call. There are about 8,000 people on this call right now. So if you're looking at the chat box and you're saying, wow, that is moving way too fast, that is because there are a lot of people. They are ready. They are here tonight, and they are already figuring out how to organize, as this question indicates. So, who wants to take this question? Organizing in rural areas and small towns, and how do you build your group?
I'll take a whack at it. I grew up in a rural area in a small town in Texas, with basically no progressive infrastructure. And I've told this story before. There was an Indivisible group that was founded there, by Aaron Zwiner, a young mother who was just very mad at the political situation at Trump, and then got very mad at her local state rep, and then jumped off from her local Indivisible group in Buda, Texas, to challenge her state rep, and with the support of the local group, won election, and then won re-election, and then won re-election again. So organizing progressive power in rural communities and red communities is so near and dear to my heart. I love this question. It's something that brings me a lot of joy, and I think it's something that is really, really necessary. It's not enough to just organize in city centers or just in the suburbs. We need to be in red areas. We need to be in rural areas. And I think too often national operations, national organizations they just write off the rural areas or the red areas and say, well, there aren't enough people there, or our people aren't there. Even in a district that is 80% Trump, 80% MAGA, 20% of the population is on our side. One of the amazing phenomena from early Indivisible was talking to groups who were organizing in rural and red areas, who said, I didn't know there were others like us. I didn't know I had community here. So you are doing a huge service to your community by having the guts to stand out there and say, hey, I disagree with this. I'm not on this side. You will find others. Most of the time, most people aren't paying attention. You 8 to 10,000 people on this call, you are jazzed up right now. We have tens of thousands of people who are joining us for the call next week. What I would predict is that we are in a wave moment right now. A lot of people are shocked, they're scared, they're angry, they're looking for community. This right now in this moment, this is the opportunity to start pulling people into your group. It doesn't need to be a grand strategic plan. It doesn't need to be a deep policy analysis. It can simply be, this is scary. I want to be with people who are of like mind. Let's talk, let's meet, let's commiserate. That's enough. That's how the Indivisible movement got started. That's how we have groups in every single state and just about every congressional district. So if you are already in an Indivisible group, I would put something together to invite new people to come in this moment as they're trying to process. If there's not an Indivisible group near you, start one. Get 10 of your friends together or family members together and put an event together. You'll be surprised who will come out. There are folks who have made lifelong friends and built incredible political powerhouses simply by getting a few people together in a living room after something atrocious that Trump did happened. So take advantage of these moments where more people are paying attention and welcome them in. And we're here to help. We want that to happen all over in deep, deep red areas and everywhere else.
All right, thank you, Ezra. Okay, we have got a ton of questions about ballot curing. What is it? How does it work? Do you have to live in the state to do it? What does it matter? Does anybody want to take that, or should I jump in?
I can start. So we should have a couple links going in the chat, and we'll also follow up with links for Nevada and Arizona because you can phone bank to help. And it's basically to correct anything that's missing. So specifically in Nevada, a bunch of them need to get signatures validated. And so you would be helping to call and make sure that the voters are aware of this so they have a chance to cure or, confirm and validate what they need to validate within their ballot. So yes, there should be phone banking links that go out either in this chat now or as a follow-up if you want to help with those efforts.
Right. And just to emphasize, you do not need to be based in state to help with that. So that is a super tangible way right now and for like a very short period of time, because there's a time limit on this, to make sure that every Democratic ballot gets counted. All right. Okay, next question. What happens to Trump's court cases?
They go away. I'm sorry. It's the painful truth. They they go away. We don't know what'll happen after he leaves office, but for now, he has escaped the long arm of the law.
I want to sit with that for a second because it is heavy. It is heavy. It is profoundly unfair. We all deserve better. We deserve to see justice done for his many, many crimes. And unfortunately, what we have learned once again is that we are going to have to organize to build the power that is necessary to deliver any form of accountability in this country, because it is simply the reality.
I can I just note I'm seeing some anger, some well-placed anger at Merrick Garland in the chat. And I just want to comment on that because we are not out of power for good. We are not out of power for good. We are going to win back the Congress. We are going to win back the White House. There will be a day when we find ourselves with a new administration. I think one of the great strategic blunders of the early Biden administration was by Merrick Garland refusing to seek swift justice and make sure that Trump was actually prosecuted for the crimes that he committed. There's an alternative universe where we actually moved forward with that swiftly, and we weren't looking forward to sentencing on November 26th. That will not occur now. When we get the White House again, we need to uphold the rule of law and make it a priority. That's a fight for another day. I think folks on this call should be reasonably disappointed that we find ourselves in this position, but I don't want to act as if it's anything different. That's the reality we face now as a result of those strategic errors.
Right. I want to diverge from the Q&A a little bit because I'm seeing versions of something that's coming up in the chat. I'm seeing people who are fired up. I'm seeing people who are asking how to start Indivisible groups, who are asking how to join Indivisible groups. We will get you that information. We want to make sure that if you want to organize right now, we want to be your home and help you to do that. And if you want to connect with people who are doing that, we want to make sure you make that connection. I'm also seeing some people who are saying that they are scared, that they are tired, that they are burnt out. and that they're just really depressed by this result. And I just want to speak directly to anybody who is feeling that, who is feeling lost, who is feeling too tired, who just doesn't want to, who's just depressed right now, and say everything that you are feeling is valid. And you should take all of the time you need to feel those things. If you need to scream, you need to scream. If you need to take a really long nap, you need to take a really long nap. If you need to step away from this work for some time, you need to step away from this work for some time. That's okay. We'll be here when you're back. We'll be here when you're ready. We need you. The movement needs you, but it doesn't need all of you at every moment. We remember here, the choir keeps singing. The choir keeps singing even when one person takes a breath. That is what makes us powerful. All right. And now I am seeing a question. How do we fight this war against fascism using the tools for the moment rather than fighting the last war? Does anyone want to take a crack at that one?
I've been talking a lot, but I'm happy to.
Oh, go for it.
So I think the fight is going to be different. I think we should recognize there are some similarities here, right? I mean, it is Donald Trump. He has the Senate. He may have the House. They are going to overreach. And also, we know the Republican Party of 2016 is not the Republican Party of 2024. We know that the Trump administration of 2025 will not be the Trump administration of 2017. The Republican Party has basically entirely been taken over by MAGA extremists who will not act as a check on Donald Trump's overreach. The Republicans in Congress are more sure that they've got solid ground under their feet, and so they will be more difficult to push. So I don't want to act as if this is the exact same as 2016, 2017, 2018. And also, I want to be clear, we still live in a representative democracy. There will be a Wisconsin Supreme Court race in the spring. There will be elections in Virginia and New Jersey in the fall. The Trump tax scam will expire at the end of 25, and there will be a fight over what to do with those tax cuts. There will be a fight over the budget. And in 2026, there will be midterm elections decided by voters who strongly disagree with the agenda that we know Trump and his supporters are going to push. So I don't want to act as if this is just, well, let's just replay it. It's the exact same thing. It's not the exact same thing, but there are elements that remain the same for strategic purposes, which is we still got to make sure that folks understand the damage that is being done by this administration and his allies in Congress. And we've still got to make sure that then folks hold their members of Congress accountable when they are going hand in glove with Trump to support that agenda. And we've still then got to get the voters out in that Supreme Court special, in the Virginia and New Jersey elections and in the midterms. So those basic ways of showing up are still important. And nobody knows the specifics of the fights that are going to come at us once Trump comes into office. But we do know that if the people band together effectively in their communities, it will be much, much, much more difficult for them to do the damage that they intend to do.
Yeah, and just to build on what Ezra is talking about, we got another question about the 2026 midterms. And just to say, like, we're clear that we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. Like, we are going to need to rebuild power so that we can contest it federally again. And we're going to, like I said earlier, we're going to have things we learn. There's some things we can learn right now, but a lot of that's going to take some time for us to fully capture the insights we need to capture without over applying the wrong things right now. But one of the things just to point out is the Senate map. For example, Democrats will not be defending as many seats as they were defending this round. They were defending a ton of seats this cycle. And next cycle, it will be Senate Republicans that are defending way more seats. And on top of that, some of the Senate races that we'll be looking at are in places where there is like really important stuff happening on the ground. There are going to be really important things happening with constituents to make sure that what Trump is trying to do is toxified, that people know about it. We know his policies are going to be unpopular. We are not going to let him get away with it, and we're going to draw a lot of attention to it. So just to say that like we will be again pointing out all the things that are unpopular and making sure that all of our folks in these states like New Jersey, like Georgia, like Michigan, like New Hampshire, that they all know um, what's at stake. And so I just want to say that like that is one thing. Like again, we're coming off of a really tough Senate map, but we're going to be going into a cycle that is more favorable for Democrats, won't be happening during a presidential, but will be a response to what will be a very unpopular president.
That's right. That's right. All right. I hope that this has been a helpful Q&A for folks. I do want to just answer one final question. We are seeing a number of questions around various themes about safety of activists, people who worked on election stuff, people who are part of groups like Indivisible, Trump's political and enemies, what kind of retaliation we might expect, and what steps we'll need to take to ensure that we organize safely. Does anyone want to take a first step at that, or should I? I'll go ahead. I don't want to sugarcoat and I don't want to gaslight anybody. I think we can expect that Donald Trump will attempt to retaliate against his political opponents. He has been open in his fantasizing about doing so. His Truth Social posts have gotten increasingly clear about that intention. We also should be real that he's been very open about his intention to weaponize different elements of the federal government to go after political opponents in general and the right to protest more broadly and organize more broadly. These things are real. What is also true is that what happens next depends on the pushback that he gets. Again, we are not going to give this man powers that he does not already have. We are going to be there for each other. The first person who he goes after, whether that is Liz Cheney or whether that is someone you have never heard of before, we got to be there for them, right? We've got to show up for each other in this moment. We have got to interrupt the cycle of what experts on authoritarianism call anticipatory obedience, the idea that you just kind of put your head down and go along. We got to interrupt that. We have got to be there for each other. So this is not every answer. There is more that we will share. There is more that we will think about how do we organize safely and securely and with an awareness of the risks, both of political violence and escalating repression. But fundamentally, the answer is we're going to be there for each other. All right. And with that, I think we are approaching the time when we need to wrap the Q&A and move over to the calls to action. Ezra, do you want to take us through the calls to action, or would you like me to?
I love a good call to action, and also, oh, there they are. We've got a whole thing of calls to actions. Great. Sorry, y'all. I'm all discombobulated. So Leah, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but here are a few steps that we can take immediately. I think, as everybody knows, Indivisible, while we share similar values, we are most tied together by this belief that engaging in politics isn't just about watching some talking heads on a Zoom or on TV. It is about actually doing things, is actually doing the work to protect our democracy. So with that in mind, here are practical things that you can actually do to make a difference. One is please sign up to Help for Ballot Curing. Uh, it is some of the best volunteer work you can do, just in terms of enjoyability, can I say? Because you get to call folks who are on our side, who are similarly worried about who is going to control the House of Representatives. And you get to tell them, hey, we can save your vote. Your vote might be rejected, but I just identified if you go and clear up this signature issue, your vote will be counted. They are thrilled. They are thrilled. So it is great volunteer work to do, and it could actually make the difference in who controls the House of Representatives. So please, please, please sign up to do some ballot curing. Second, we're asking folks host community discussions. I talked about this a little bit earlier, this is a time when people are reaching out and looking for community. They don't necessarily have that community. And I mean geographically around you, in your neighborhood, in your city, people who physically live around you, who can gather in person and talk to you. If you've got to do a Zoom, that's okay. But I would highly recommend actually gathering if you can in person as well, if that's possible. We will be in the streets. Don't get me wrong. We're going to be protesting. We're going to be pushing. That's going to be part of the future plan. But we want to make sure that folks understand they're not alone. And if you're worried about, oh gosh, I don't know what are we going to talk about? Like, I don't have a big strategic plan. Again, this is mainly about connecting with folks in this moment. And if you need some help, we've got a whole guide, a conversation facilitation guide to lead you through this really difficult moment that many folks are going through. Um, Third, we're doing a big call. This was a big call itself. We're going to do another big call next week. We've made some mention of a new Indivisible guide. Lee and I are working on finishing this up for this new political moment that we're in. But the release of that guide will be coming next week, and we'll be holding a session like this to dig into all of the details of the new practical ways that we can get involved to push back against this administration, build power, and build towards a win in 2026. That is happening next week, Wednesday, November 13th. And there's another action item. I think we've already mentioned it, and I just talked about it with Maddo and Jen. But tomorrow night, it's not on this list in front of you, but tomorrow night, oh, there it is, even bigger. Perfect. Tomorrow night, please join this. There are going to be tens of thousands of folks on. This is Indivisible, but it's not just Indivisible. This is hundreds of groups that we work with all the time. Folks like Maurice Mitchell at WFP, Ron Epting at Move On. We've got an incredible group of folks who are going to be talking about not just how we build community, but what is the strategic plan going forward so we move together. Leah,
That's
what else
right.
did I miss?
You've got it. You've got it. I just want to underscore again the point around community. Indivisible, we got started in a dark moment in 2016, but fundamentally, we got started out of the ties that people built in that dark moment. I know this has been an unbelievably hard day. I've seen in the chat several people saying some version of how are you all so composed? How are you all so calm? And I just want to be really clear. We are so angry. We are so we are processing everything that you are processing. What helps in this moment, what is holding us up is being part of this community. What is helping us is what we believe everyone needs to tap into in the time ahead. Nobody is going to feel better from another hour scrolling through social media. What is going to make you feel better in this moment? What is going to give you this grounding? What is going to give you the support that you need to keep moving, to keep one foot in front of each other or the other, is getting together in community. So if it feels like a tall order, please check out the guide. We're happy to try to give you some steps and ways to walk through this process so that you're not alone in it. But we really encourage folks to think about how do you gather in community with people you know, hold each other up, process together, and make resolutions about what you're going to do next. So with all of that, I want, yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just want to say one more time, we feel so much appreciation for this group. We feel so much appreciation for this movement. This is not the outcome that any of us wanted. It is an outcome that people on this call worked enormously hard, have given years of their lives, have given extraordinary things to try to avert. It is the outcome that we are facing now, and we will fight like hell to stop the harm that this man will cause to our communities, to our neighbors, to the folks under threat. We will fight like hell to protect our democracy, to protect our elections, to protect our institutions, to protect our rule of law, to protect each other. And we're going to beat him. We are going to beat him.
We're going to win, folks. It doesn't feel like that right now, but we are going to win.
We are going to win.
We are, and we come from a strong lineage of people who are exactly where they're supposed to be. We are exactly where we're supposed to be. We know how to do this, and we got each other. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all tomorrow, and we'll see you next week, and we'll see you in the streets.